Short Takes with Joy and Tova. I'm Joy here in Hiroshima, Japan,
Hi, I'm Tove Kinooka in Yokohama, Japan.
and we are both sustainability focused in the work that we do. I'm mostly focused in the travel sector, and we have some updates for the travel sector today. And Tova, you mostly work with corporate and leadership training and consulting, right?
Yes, so we work with large corporates, both Japanese and international. And basically, what we do is help them close the say do gap between what they say they're doing on sustainability and what is actually happening inside the organization. So, developing leaders and organizational culture.
It's so important. And so I love talking to you every month. We always have different things that we're kind of on our radar. So it's so nice to get together with somebody else who is working and travel and life is focused on sustainability and hear what your updates are. So let's get started.
Okay.
Today, do you know what today is? National holiday.
It's Umi no Hi, right?
It's Umi no Hi. It's Ocean Day. So we can't go without talking about the ocean. And I was looking at, unfortunately, Japan's ranking for world ocean health and giving an update on my change.org campaign to try to put positive pressure on Hiroshima's oyster industry to change back to bamboo, which they have found in the Ocean Cleanup Organization. They've been cleaning up in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and they have found that Japan is the biggest contributor of plastic pollution that they pull out at 34%. China is next, 32%. Korean Peninsula is 10%. And a lot of what they show in the video is the stuff that we find on the coastlines here, which is connected to the oyster industry. So really, I'll put the link below. If people do have a chance to sign that petition, put some positive pressure on going back to using wood and bamboo and the things that they used to use only about 50 years ago. So not that long ago. But the idea that they're reusing the plastic, they say, but you can see it degrading into microplastics, and a lot of it does end up off the rafts into the coastline. I've seen very similar as far as Hawaii. It's just not something we need to be doing right now. We have better alternatives. Let's go back to that. But what I was looking at the World Health Oceans Index, and one of the interesting weaknesses in Japan, which I was really surprised about. So it has the goal evaluation here and all the different categories that they do this ranking of 68 out of 100. One of the weakest parts is tourism. And so their tourism and recreation evaluation is how the country is making use of its coastline, protecting its coastline in terms of tourism industry. And so out of a score out of 100, unfortunately, it's pretty low. It's like 16. So what can the and this is something I do consulting and training and education in, is connected to the tourism industry. How can the tourism industry be more conscious about plastic use, taking care of the beaches, the beach cleanups? It's everybody's responsibility, right?
Very much so.
Yeah. So today is always a great chance to think about what we can do as consumers. Have you done anything? So I make new goals. I try to support my Misus, an awesome organization, nonprofit, and they have a computer app now. So you can use my Misu app on your computer. It's in beta version. You can use it on your phone. And they've saved almost 650,000 plastic bottles and counting. That's amazing. 215 tons of CO2 and counting, and 71,000, looks like 7 million yen that has been saved. And I just searched for my Hiroshima area. There's lots of my Mizu refill stations where you can go clean water refill, but only one on Miyajima. So it always, doing a search always reminds me of where I should add more places to fill up.
Yeah, well,
Um,
that's the great thing about My Misu, right? Because they want people to go out and when you come across a source of water, a refill spot that's not marked, you can add it, suggest it to them to add, and then help build the whole map for everyone.
Absolutely. And it's open source in that way, right?
Mm.
So that everybody can be a part of the solution,
Yeah.
which is awesome. I also checked your Yokohama area. I'll bring up in a second. Oh, great to see you. Natasha has joined us live from YouTube. I wish they would leave the ocean totally alone. I think it's the idea that the ocean is too big to fail
Mm.
is the idea that a lot of advocates and activists often talk about now. And we know now that it's not too big to fail, and we see it failing. And there are little things that we can do, but also we need to put pressure on government to take bigger action, on
Yeah.
companies to make bigger change. One
Hmm.
of the targets I did for myself was I never buy a pet drink bottle anymore, which is really hard.
It is.
But it's an opportunity to buy very strange fringe drinks. Like I'll buy like a cream soda sometimes, which I usually don't drink, but it's in a can from a sub, like not one of the big brands. Or I've gotten used to buying those lemon Genki drinks in the convenience store because it's in a glass bottle and I know that's going to be recycled instead of
Yeah.
burned, right? Or end up in the ocean. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, it's so hard. My Misu really helps, but yeah, we need more options, right?
Yes, very much so.
Now,
Yeah.
Muji is another one I've talked about before, and they do not sell pet bottles for drinks anymore. So
Mm.
they that's one of their big changes as a company. So also, if you bring your own container into a Muji store, you can refill for free.
Yeah.
So they're one of the big company chains that have really changed, and it's wonderful to see that.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. So wait, I said I was going to show the Yokohama one. Let's see how you've done
What's
in
it
your
looking like?
area.
Pretty
Now,
good, I think.
Yokohama, Tokyo, that's kind of where my Mizu is based. So you guys
Wow.
have so many places to refill, but we could always do with more. And one of the things I love about my Mizu is also you can discover great companies that are taking part, which you might not have discovered otherwise, right? So I've walked in with my bottle and be like, "Do you guys have a refill?" And they're like, "Yes, yes, over here." And a nice chance to talk with more ethical companies, I think, which is
Yeah.
cool.
Very much so. And it's a great way for, smaller companies, particularly, I think, to get noticed, to get literally on the map, and attract new customers. Like you say, you might not have known about it otherwise until you went there to fill up. So
That's right. Now, Tova, you've been to Okinawa. Tell us about it.
well, it's interesting when you talk about Ocean Day, right? So maybe before I get on to the main topic of OIST, Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology, we did get a few hours sort of off between meetings, and went snorkeling, which was wonderful. And, we went to this point where you go into the water, and the minute you put the second you put your head in the water, there are fish everywhere. It's wonderful. So you're swimming around, you're looking at the coral, looking at all these species of fish. And I think it's very easy to fall into a false sense of security and think, well, there are all these fish here. It must be fine. The ocean must be nice and healthy. But then you start looking around, you notice there's a lot of dead coral, actually. And obviously some die off is natural. But actually, when we were at OIST, we sat in on a press conference they had, just launching a new project on coral conservation. And the scientists who've been studying this for decades in Okinawa, said that in the last 10 years, I think they've had a sort of 50% decrease in biodiversity on the reefs there, which was pretty shocking, actually. That's a big drop in a very short time. So I think unless people hear about this, they wouldn't realize, unless you're going in with an expert eye, it's very easy to swim around and think, well, everything looks wonderful and I had a lovely time, which I did. But, there's there are warning signs everywhere there that actually we really need to be taking note of. And there was one point we sort of swam along the coastline a little bit, and then there's this beautiful big cave. And so we sort of came out of the water and went in and had a walk around the cave. And when you first walk into it, it looks amazing. The water's crystal clear sort of within the cave. But then we got to the back where the sort of dry area of the cave was, and there was plastic everywhere. Just a lot of fishing industry plastic, a lot of PET bottles. And a lot of it sort of starting to break down into the microplastics, which become an even bigger problem because then, they're getting into the food chain unnoticed. So it was really, sad to see that actually that impact of humanity on this beautiful natural environment. And I think a big wake up call that, we can all be doing a lot more as industries and as individuals.
And Okinawa, like Hawaii, is so dependent on tourism.
Yes,
So
very
I
much
have
so.
noticed beach areas which are dependent on tourism because they have cafes and restaurants and they
Mhm.
do water activities like SUP
Yep.
and kayak. They are more proactive in getting local people out cleaning up those beaches because they know it's such an asset.
Yeah.
And so that's good to see because when I first came over to Japan almost 30 years ago, people would say, oh, the garbage on the beach, that's not our problem. That's
Right.
coming from somewhere else. We don't have to deal with that. But
Yeah.
now you see this ownership of responsibility. I know it's not my personal problem, but hey, there's
Mm.
something I can do which helps my business, my
Yeah.
community. So seeing that connection is wonderful.
Yeah, very much, very much. And I think that's good. I mean, it's easy to look at the beach cleans and say, "Oh, okay, well, that's just it's such a small action, really. What can it do?" But it massively increases awareness, I think, when you get people out, either, in communities or getting companies, getting them out doing a day. And it gives people a chance to think about this and how they're contributing. And if you're going out and picking up plastic from items that you use in your home, I think hopefully that should be a wake up call and say, hang on a minute, do I need this? And when I dispose of it, how am I doing that? And is it going, to be recycled
And
or
that's
properly disposed of?
absolutely true, even for
Yeah,
someone who's very focused on
mhm.
sustainability. Whenever I do a cleanup, I'm always like, yeah, I've used that
I
kind of
use
wrapper
this.
before. Yeah, I did that. I bought that before.
Yeah,
And it's just it connects
yeah.
you so much more personally to the problem,
Very
right?
much, very much. And we find a lot in the work that we do. You can talk to people at an intellectual level about, the concept of healthy oceans and environment and all of these things, and people will get it at an intellectual level. But unless you're also engaging at an emotional level too, you're not going to change behaviors because humans are driven by emotion. Decisions we make are driven by emotion very, to a huge extent. And so we need that emotional connection as well in order to get people to change.
Yeah,
So yeah, I
absolutely.
think it's really
And getting
important.
kids involved.
Yes.
There was a great example from northern or central Japan from the Ministry of Education and Environment,
Hmm.
talking about this area called Suruga Bay,
Ah,
and
yeah.
how for many years now they have been kind of because of the tides, they have been collecting lots of plastic pollution from all over Japan and even
Hmm.
Korea have been coming onto their beaches, and they're getting kids involved in activities. It's part of their local education. And that's really important because the kids are going to think of the new ideas, how to tackle these
Yeah,
things too, right?
yeah, very
And
much.
we're passing on the problem to them. So we really need to talk
Yeah,
clearly to them
yeah.
about that. And they might have great ideas, right?
Exactly, exactly. And the motivation to go out and do something about it. This is their future. So
Now, you were at the university in Okinawa, were you?
yes. So we were down there visiting OIST, so Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology, and it's really an incredible place. If anyone gets an opportunity to visit, I would highly recommend it. So as you can see there, it's a graduate university, so it's only PhDs and above there. It started around 12 years ago, and they've already had one Nobel Prize winner there, which is pretty good going for most institutions take a lot longer than that to get to that level. And it's really an incredible place. It brings together the whole physical space has been very carefully thought through and designed to facilitate interactions between scientists studying very, very different things. So there are no departments, like most universities or research institutes would have the physics and the chemistry and everything, and the engineering would all be very, very separate. Here it's not at all. So there are around 50, I think, professors there at the moment, and then their research staff and students working with them, and they all have their own lab, but they're not separated by the different disciplines. And actually all the PhD students there have to rotate around different labs, and including they have to do one rotation in a discipline which has no relation to their original area of study. So it's really, really interesting concept in that it helps people really think very differently, connect dots across different areas of science, which I think is incredibly important. It's very easy, I think, for these brilliant, brilliant people like any of us to get stuck into, their particular area and go very, very deep on that, and then maybe not see how it connects to other areas of science or the outside world and so on. So OIST is really designed to help them make those connections. And they also, the funding model, rather than get funding for a particular project, they get funding for the professor for 5 years. And within that, they can do anything they like. So they have the flexibility as they start researching, going, okay, well, this is interesting. And that came up, and that was something we didn't expect. Let's go deeper in there. So they really have flexibility to really go with the science and go where that takes them, which is just incredible. I mean, there was one scientist there, Mahesh Bandy, who's brilliant guy, and I've had the honor of meeting him before as well up here in Yokohama. And he calls himself a kind of scientist of everything. He's interested in everything. He can't keep himself to one discipline. And during COVID, he's from India originally, and was very sort of frustrated watching the COVID situation unfold there, and the fact that they were struggling to treat all the patients. They didn't have enough medical grade oxygen to treat the people who needed it. So he managed to kind of re-engineer a cotton candy floss machine, to make medical grade oxygen to treat COVID victims. And I think that kind of thinking is not the kind of thinking we come across every day. And it's very out of the box, very sort of, it only comes when you can be exposed, I think, to a lot of different things, and that might not necessarily be related at the beginning, but then you can see how to make the connections between them. So what we want to start doing with OIST, and we're talking to them about this now, and to a client that's interested in piloting this, is to bring science and business together here and look at, okay, how can the kind of thinking and the setup that they've got going on at OIST help companies learn about what they're doing and how they're operating and thinking as leaders, how they're connecting across functions and different parts of their business to actually, do things a lot more efficiently. But also one thing, somebody's put in the comments here, I think Slimane Azizi, and apologies if my pronunciation was not correct, but greenwashing by companies makes that a challenge, right? Yes. Okay. So greenwashing is a huge challenge, we know. And I think a lot of that comes from the companies having good intentions, but not knowing how to do this. You look at something like biodiversity protection, and we've got new regulations coming out around the TNFD, the sort of disclosures for nature, non-financial disclosures, and setting biodiversity targets. It's very different to setting something like a carbon target, which is very easy to measure, easy to understand, and you can set it, and then you can say, okay, well, in order to reduce our carbon, we need to do this, this, this. Doesn't mean they're doing it, but at least it's relatively easy to understand. When it comes to things like biodiversity, a lot of companies don't understand how their business is connected to biodiversity. They don't understand why it's important and what they need to do to protect it, and what they can do as a particular industry, when they might be sort of maybe quite far removed from the original source of their impact. So I think by talking to the scientists who are studying biodiversity, say, and there was one guy we spoke to, that's what he does. It really struck me that there's a lot companies could learn to say, okay, this is what we mean by it. Here's why it's important, and here's what we can do as a company to actually make a positive impact here. So we really want to look at how we can bring the science and business communities together to benefit everyone, right? Because the companies need that sort of knowledge and understanding and a different way of thinking. And the scientists, very often, they have great ideas, and maybe there's a gap between getting those ideas into implementation so they can actually have positive impact. So they need, maybe ideas and support from companies to say, well, how do we take this from a wonderful idea into something practical that will help us? So
That's so
win-win all round, I
true.
think.
And I was interviewed the other day by a PhD student doing research on sustainability in Japan. And she was saying, what's one of the big issues for you? And I said, it's greenwashing, of course, but it's also the other side. We have so many long-running businesses in Japan, which have always kind of had very deeply sustainable tactics and philosophies, which they're continuing to doing, and they don't feel the need to talk about it. But you have other companies that are talking about something very small, making it look big. And then you have this general lack of awareness that Japan is actually, compared to other parts of the world, very not sustainable, like in terms of the day-to-day and what opportunities we have. So it's complex, right? But it's not. I think that there is an overall feeling in Japan that all businesses are sustainable, and that's definitely not true. But the
Not at
other
all.
extreme is not true either. So it is a very complicated landscape, I think, in terms of talking about where we are right now. But I think on the day-to-day, doing what you can do, sharing on social media the good opportunities for reuse and refill that you find, which are so rare, finding opportunities for vegan and vegetarian, which we know is a lot less negative impact on the environment. I see, Natasha, you're commenting on vegan and vegetarian. Thank you so much.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's one of the things we always do when we're working with corporates is to break it down into manageable and tangible actions, right? Because I think, we have a huge issue with this just being so big and, like you say, overwhelming, too big to fail, right? The ocean's too big to fail, or this problem is just too big and too complex to know where to start. So even if people do have the will and intention to do something good, it's like, well, I'm one person or one small team in an organization. What can I do? But actually there is, absolutely something you can do. We just really need to break it down to those tangible levels, get people engaged here as well as here, and then it can start to roll from there.
Yeah, I see Greg Friston, thanks for joining, has a comment on candy floss machines. We have one in Onomichi. I just noticed the other day a cotton
There
candy
you go.
machine in Onomichi. And I was like, yeah, if they just had reusable containers right here in this machine, that would be better. I
Yes.
mean, we always have room for improvement, right?
Very much, very much. And who knew they could
Now,
do things other than candy floss?
oh yeah, absolutely. For vegetables, local
Yeah,
vegetables in the machine. I like that idea, which we do have
wonderful.
in Japan too. One of the things that I'm really excited, I was just hired to cover the Earth celebration on Sato
Ooh.
Island coming up next month. And I know that they still have tickets available. It's just a celebration of culture. The island is really famous for its taiko drumming.
Mm.
And if you search YouTube for the Sato celebration, Earth celebration, you can see all these amazing performers of taiko. There's concerts every night. I'm going to stay for 3 days
Oh,
camping,
fantastic.
enjoying the beaches and all the fringe festival activities as well. So I'm really
Mhm.
excited about that. But also, it's an island that does have sustainable principles. So I'm excited about finding those and helping to promote those.
Mhm.
They have a rare kind of bird, which has kind of encouraged them to use less pesticides and fertilizers to protect that local wildlife, which
Brilliant.
is so
Yep.
special. And so things like that, which are very difficult to find information about. So I hope by me being there, I've wanted to go for years, and I hope by me being there, it can be another reason to highlight these wonderful things that they are doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. And things like that, I think, if you can highlight that, it helps that obviously that local area hopefully gives them more visibility and awareness, but hopefully other areas as well will look at that and go, well, what could we be doing? It raises the bar for everyone. And I think creates a really sort of positive cycle of competition. So brilliant. Get the word out there. Looking forward to hearing
Excited.
about
And
it.
it's 1,000 kilometers from where I am, but I'm
Wow.
going to do the slow drive in my electric car, and I'm going
Fantastic.
to have my electric car on the island. So if you need a ride, just put your hand up. I'm happy to take you around the island if we're going to the same
I
place.
wish I was here.
It'd be really fun.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Now, Tova, you had another example, a Periscope Japan launch that you had been a part of.
Yep. So Periscope is an organization that, so it's a sort of carbon accounting and carbon, trying to think of the right word, and apologies to Periscope for not getting this right, but it's basically bringing together all the carbon data for a company, which very often is difficult to measure, because if you think about a large company that, say, has a headquarters and then it's got factories and it's got logistics parts of it as well, they're probably all measuring their carbon, or maybe they're not even measuring it at the moment, but in a very different way. And Maya here, she's brilliant. She launched Google in India many years ago. She's got a brilliant track record of getting companies up and moving. So I'm expecting great things from Periscope. But the great thing about them is that it's very easy for companies to put together all their data, and it doesn't matter what formats it's in. It can be on sort of a particular piece of software one side, it can be on an Excel sheet or something, from another part of the company, but you can put it all together and then get a full picture from scope 1 down to scope 3 of what is your company's carbon impact, carbon emissions. So it makes it a lot easier to track for companies that are struggling to know where to start and how do we do this. And it actually came out of their parent company, Olam, had a very complex, they're an agricultural services company, and they had a very complex supply chain. They had to figure this out for themselves some years ago and created the sort of the methodology and the technology to be able to do that. And then they decided, well, actually, this is something other companies could benefit from too. Let's make this into a company. So that was how Periscope started. So they've just launched their Japan operations and they're building their team here now. So I think this will be really interesting. I'm going to be sort of watching them closely to see how it grows and how they're able to help companies really sort of get past the sort of the paralysis of where do we start and how do we do this, to say, okay, well, this is what we can do. Here's step 1, here's step 2, here's where we can map it out.
I think that's so important. And to get third-party consultants who have years of experience and can help you benchmark as well and say, hey, this is what another company similar to you
Very
is
much.
doing. And it doesn't have to be from within Japan. Around the world, we've got so many great examples to draw on that data from over the years, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's also very helpful, because a lot of the companies, that the first thing we get asked when we go to talk to anyone is what's the case study? What are other companies doing in our industry? Because they need a benchmark. They need to know where are we and what's the bar? How do we move?
I just started a new collaboration with JTB, and it looks like I've got my first consulting with a tourism organization that they're interested in exactly that. Like, what is our next step? How can we do a little bit better? This is where we are. Where can we go next? Right.
Yeah.
And I know that you do a lot of work like that. And it's just people need that extra guidance and support and encouragement that they're doing the right thing,
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting. I was reading something. I'm actually reading a very interesting book at the moment called Nudge, which has been around for quite some time. But this is the new revised version, the final version, apparently, according to the authors. They've given themselves that nudge of putting it on the cover so they can't revise it again. But talking about how people respond so much better to positive feedback, rather than saying, well, you're doing it all wrong and here's what you shouldn't be doing. Actually saying, well, here's what you should or could be doing, and here's what other companies are doing. How about that I think that positive examples, positive encouragement, maybe a combination of both. Sometimes we also need that for the ones who are a little slow to move, but people generally do respond better to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a great idea to end on, Tove. Thank you once again. And everybody get that book, Nudge. I want to get it too. Sounds awesome. I will
Brilliant.
leave you all with the sounds of taiko at the Earth celebration to inspire you
Cool.
for your day. These awesome young women. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Bye.
Isn't this fun? I love how they're smiling too.
They're obviously really enjoying it.
Right? I can't wait to see this in person. Have you ever tried taiko, Tove?
No, once at a festival, just hanging once or twice, but